I'm Eric. This is Annalise.
Hi.
We got your questions, so we chopped them up into 3 categories just to make it flow a little bit better. Go ahead, Annalise, see what they are.
So first category is kind of the early days and how Hydra got started. Second category is all about Shark Tank. And then the third is kind of what's in the future for Hydra. So,
All right.
ready?
It'll be good.
Let's do it. So first question, are you going to diversify your product? If so, how?
So, no, that's a really good question because, like in business, the idea is you have a lot of products to sell to your customers. With Hydra, we're doing a little bit differently because we're focused on making like the best under-sink water filter on the planet, and then we're also making a great fridge line filter and shower filter. So rather than start really, really big, we're actually starting very, very focused and then building out the product line as we need to.
Cool. All right, second, how long did it take you to produce the first Hydra filter, and what did you do to test it?
Wow. No, that's a really good question. So the first prototype, and what I mean by prototype is like the first thing you kind of put together with Scotch tape and bubble gum. That took probably, this was back in 2015, probably took a month. But it's important to know that like I had worked in R&D for about 10 years before that. So, I kind of knew what to do already. So it took me about a month to sort that out, to make the first prototype. We tested it by going to, just flowing water through it and seeing how effective it was. We didn't hit full-scale manufacturing until late 2017, early 2018, and now we're at full-scale manufacturing. So it's kind of like one of those things where, you ask like how long did it take to make it, and it's like, well, there were kind of baby steps along the way, and we're going to continue to make steps.
All right. How did you get your business off the ground?
Whew. Off the ground. Is it really off the ground yet? Hydra actually wasn't really supposed to be a business in the early days. It was something that was really just supposed to be a charitable response to like the Flint lead stuff that was going on. And the idea was, I'm a chemist, I know how to make water filters, and it was just to donate them to, people in need. The business actually started kind of early in 2016 when I was selling door to door just in the neighborhood that I live in, literally just going and putting flyers on fence posts and stuff, and it just kind of took off from there. Shark Tank was a big step for us, and that gave us a ton of exposure, put us at a national level. So I would say Shark Tank kind of got us off the ground, but again, there's like little baby steps that take place really before we launch. So again, it's just starting small and getting bigger from there.
Mm-hmm. Kind of answered this one, but how did you come up with the idea of the water filter thing?
The water filter thing. No, that's a really, really good question because again, the idea was start with Flint, make a water filter for Flint, and then as I started talking to other people, as I was trying to like get donations for it, they're like, well, could you make a water filter for Washington, D.C.? It's like, yeah, I could make something that's optimized for Washington, D.C. They're like, well, I have a brother in Chicago. Could you make a water filter for Chicago? What about Santa Fe? What about this? And that's kind of where the idea of personalizing and making the water filters city specific came about. It was really just by listening to customers. That's the truth of it.
Cool. All right. Was it difficult to produce the product?
Yes. I do not have a background in manufacturing, and we're manufacturing a custom product. So like when you're looking at anything, whether it's a phone or a water filter or whatever it is, you kind of look at it, you take it apart, and then you're like, I need to actually source every single one of these things, then figure out how to make it, then figure out how to make it really, really well, then at low cost, and make sure that the quality stays high. So it's one of those things, yeah, it's really hard to do. I'd never manufactured water filters before. I'd never done injection molding. I'd never done plumbing component assembly or anything like that. So yeah, it took some time to figure out how to do that, and it's still hard. We're still updating our packaging. Just last month we launched new packaging because there's always improvements that you can make there. So yeah, it's hard and it's a long process. And what I would say if you're looking to start a company, I would say like don't focus on getting it like absolutely perfect at the beginning. Like if there's some cosmetic issues, you can take care of those later. I would say like just again take that first step.
All right. How long did it take you to design the filters?
I think that was kind of part of that like 1 month like prototyping time. So it was, look, when I was making these, it's like, okay, there's industry standard sizes. So that was a really good starting point for me because we could buy the parts. So, that's how we're able to get it off the ground. So, I mean, the design didn't take a lot of time. Our product is not really beautifully designed anyway. So I would say that's something that's been a secondary priority for us.
All right. This is a good question.
Ooh.
We recently found out our school water contains cancer-causing chemicals via the internet. Could you make and sell a filter to our school?
So I think there was some news coverage about PFAS in Lisbon. I think, am I right? I think that's true. So I assume that's, I think that's what you're talking about. And I mean, we make water filters that remove PFAS. They've been tested by Duke, NC State. We sell those filters all over the country. We don't really at this time sell to schools though. So, I think a big thing with water filtration that's very, very important is making sure that you maintain it. And just we've been focusing on people's homes, not schools at this point. But it doesn't mean that we couldn't hypothetically build something. But yeah.
Cool. All right. Have you had any health or effectiveness complaints from customers?
No, we haven't. We spend a lot of money on testing. Sometimes we have customers that like use a pool test kit and they get the wrong answer, but that's not really that's them messing up the measurement. That's not our filter not performing. So all in, we've probably spent $500,000, $750,000 on testing this product. So we spend a lot of money on that. So it's good that we haven't had any real issues there.
This is also another very good question.
All right.
How did you set a market equilibrium or retail price?
We tested it. So if you set your price too low, people don't believe it works. If you set it too high, they can't afford it. So you need to price it somewhere in between those two things so you're making enough profit that you can actually run your business without charging too much, because you don't want to charge too much. That's not a good thing. So yeah, it was all through testing. We've tested all this stuff, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like seeing what other water filter
Yeah, you look at your
companies are
competition as
charging.
well. Again, if you have two things and they're similar and one's like $500 and one's $40, people are going to take a look at the $40 thing. So you want to make sure to be price competitive for sure. But we do make a premium product, like everyone else makes one water filter that covers everyone, and we do have some added value in that. So our pricing is higher than kind of the stuff you buy at Walmart.
Alrighty, Shark Tank questions.
Ooh, Shark Tank. All right.
I was gonna make a pun and say dive in. Anyways,
Ooh.
how long ago were you on Shark Tank?
So great question. So we taped the episode in September 2018. Our episode aired April 2019. So there's a length of time. So Shark Tank, every year they film 2 times. They film in the summer and then they film in early fall. And then those are the episodes that translate over to that season. So the season typically starts in October or November. So the early episodes come from the summer taping, and then the later episodes in general come from that fall taping. I was part of the fall, what they call the pod, and we taped in mid-September 2018.
All right. Was it difficult to talk in front of the sharks and make a deal with them?
It's weird being on TV. It's weird being on a studio. So, for example, the first thing that you do, that scene where all the entrepreneurs like walk out, for example, you actually walk out and you stand on an X, and then you stand there silently for 30 seconds. Now, what I would encourage you to do is just try this in your classroom and see how weird it is. So imagine just walking out from the hallway in front of the classroom and standing there and like staring down each of your classmates for 30 seconds until Mr. Giggy says, go. And then you start like giving a presentation. That's exactly what they do on Shark Tank. You walk out there, they get their cameras whirling around you, and you're staring down like Mark Cuban. I've never seen Mark Cuban before that day. Kevin, Barbara.
Just a little intimidating.
It's just weird, and they know what they're doing, and you don't, because they do this, for every single person, and this is kind of your first time. So I would say that was the hardest part. Once we started talking business and science, then it just becomes easier, because then it's just a conversation between people. But yeah, like the weirdness of being on TV and having kind of a camera on a boom like whirling around you, and like when you walk out, you're actually following someone who's walking backwards with a camera. Like if you actually look at the camera angles and you say like, how did they actually collect that shot? It's a little bit weird. And just a funny story, I actually had to walk out twice because my cameraman like tripped the first time. So they're like, oh, cut, and then they kind of walked me back out. I'm like, all right, you got to do it again. And I'm like, all right. But yeah, it's more just like the weirdness of being on TV. But once we started talking business, you're just talking with investors at that point.
Cool. Why didn't you take the offer right away?
So that's a really, really good question. So one of the things to understand with Shark Tank is they take about an hour and a half. Like when you're actually pitching the sharks, it's much longer than what you see on TV. So my segment actually pitched for it was over an hour, and then they edit that down to 8 minutes, right? So like they can pick and choose parts through the editing process that they show. So we actually, when I was out there, it was actually even longer that I didn't take the deal. And the reason was Kevin O'Leary was actually interested. And I wanted to hear what Kevin had to say. So the idea is, Mark had made an offer. In my head, I was like, that's an okay offer. I actually wanted a higher company valuation, but I was kind of thinking about it. And I was really just dragging my feet for about 20 minutes, trying to get Kevin to make an offer. Now, Kevin usually comes out with like big royalty deals and stuff like that. But I think in the case of Hydra, that would have actually been an okay thing, right? So I was trying to see if Kevin would come in and see if I could get a little bit of a bidding war. And then there came a point where Mark was, and they didn't really show this on TV, but there came a part where Mark was like just kind of getting annoyed by it. And then I'm like, all right, if I don't do this now, I'm going to like mess this up. So then ultimately that's when kind of like things picked up a little bit.
So this next question is kind of like an insider detail question.
Okay.
And you might need to give some backstory.
Okay.
But what were you going to say to Barbara at the end before accepting the offer?
Ooh. So I'm not supposed to talk too much about what they didn't capture on air. Barbara didn't think that people knew enough about water quality to be able to kind of make that decision. And it was actually along the same lines of what Rohan was talking about. He goes, look, like, what Rohan said was, I don't think most people in this country really realize that they need to be looking at their water, and I just think it's going to take a lot of awareness. Now, in like the room, that's when Barbara was kind of talking about, she was reiterating what Rohan said, so she was largely agreeing with what Rohan said, and that's kind of where that was coming from. Now, what I was trying to get in awkwardly was just there was a little bit of a tone where there were some words that were said that made it sound like maybe our existing customer base didn't really understand a lot of stuff, and I was really just trying to stick up for our customers, because it's kind of one of those things that, and if I were to do it over again, I think I probably realized that the show wouldn't probably air someone saying really something negative about customers, but in the time I was just kind of like, I can't not defend my customers on TV. And that's kind of where that came from. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, when did you make the deal with Mark? Was it soon after you shook hands?
So this is some other pretty insider stuff with Shark Tank. It's public if you search far enough. So it's not like you walk off the stage and they hand you like a bucket of cash, right? Like
Wouldn't that have been nice?
it would have been weird, right? Because I don't know how I would have flown home with 400 grand. That's probably a lot of cash, right? I've never held 400
I think
grand.
you'd get flagged.
Yeah, okay, no. So
TSA.
that's a good thing that you don't just walk off the stage with cash. But really, once you make the deal and you leave, that's really the beginning of the process. So with Shark Tank, the sharks don't actually know anything about you before you go out on stage. So like that part of the show is 1,000,000% accurate. They're handed a card with your name on it and how to pronounce your name. Eric Roy's pretty easy, so that wasn't a huge problem. And then also how to pronounce your company name, and that's all they're handed. So like they don't know if the person walking out is selling beach balls or water filters, so they really know nothing. And it's really difficult for an investor to really get a complete picture of the company in that hour and a half, or however long you're actually pitching them. So when you leave the stage, you meet with a rep from, the shark that you make a deal with. In our case, that was Mark. And then that kicks off a conversation that takes place over the next several months where you really start to get to know each other. They look at your business. You have these conversations about like, well, this is where we want to go. This is the strategy we want to do. And ultimately, we decided that, after hearing what they were hoping we were going to do and they heard what we were hoping to do, we realized it wasn't maybe such a great fit. So we didn't end up completing the deal with Mark. So, that was a long process. It's called due diligence, and it's two-way due diligence. So it's like just getting to know Mark's team, what kind of resources they can bring to the table and things like that. So Mark is not invested in Hydra. We didn't do what's called close that round. And we left on good terms. It was a really kind of positive thing. It's just like, look, like what I wanted to do with the business is different than what they thought they could help with. So we just decided, like rather than take money and set up like a confrontational relationship, which, no one wins, we're like, well, why don't we just like kind of stay in touch and, kind of go from there.
Yeah, this just kind of extends. How much of a role does Mark even play daily, weekly, other?
No, that's a fair question. So even though we're not working with Mark directly right now, we do have friends, we have other businesses that do. Like for example, right up the road, there's a DC company that makes like snacks called Snacklands, and they made a deal with Mark and they closed their deal with Mark. It was a really good two-way fit. And basically my understanding of how it works is he's very, very responsive. Like you email him and he emails back, and that's as frequent as you want. One of the things to realize is when you're starting a company, you know more about your business than anyone else. So like where a shark can actually come in and give advice is on things in general, like structuring your business, in general marketing and things like that. So, when it comes, like, even if we would have closed a deal with Mark, it's not like we'd call him and be like, hey, we want your advice on water filtration or water quality, because, that's not what he's an expert in. So, like I think the different sharks have different levels of hands-on. We're friends with other companies that work, close their deals with the sharks, and I guess on average it's probably weekly to monthly for most people, depending on the shark and depending on the month.
Alrighty. Looking forward into the future.
Ooh, future. All right.
How did you improve marketing and advertising after your visit at Shark Tank?
That's a really good question, because that was one of the things that I was talking about on Shark Tank, was like help with sales and marketing. And we really just kind of like, we use Shark Tank as more of a launch pad, because once you're on Shark Tank, you get credibility. Like just from being on TV, people know who you are. Like in the marketing world, that's called awareness. So people are aware of who you are. The fact that you're on Shark Tank gives you something else, what's called in marketing social proof, which means it's like, look, like we made it through, the due diligence process with Sony Pictures. Like, they don't let fraudulent companies on Shark Tank, so there's some level of what's called social proof from being on Shark Tank, and we treat customers very, very well, but there are a lot of companies that don't, and just by being on Shark Tank, they kind of make sure that you treat customers well. We also started spending more on ads, and if you look at our ads, we talk about how we're on Shark Tank because that's important because of that social proof element. We really just started spending more money because Shark Tank was really our launch. So like when you launch kind of a company or a product nationwide, you start spending more money on ads. So Shark Tank was kind of the starting point for us commercially.
And I think maybe talk about what ads look like at an e-commerce business.
Could you?
So like Facebook and Google.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
So it's digital ads, right?
Yeah.
So we advertise on Facebook, Instagram, Google ads, things like that. So, we don't really do any print advertising or anything like that, just because it doesn't, for e-commerce, it just doesn't work as well. But yeah, we spend a lot of money on Google and Facebook. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Annalise?
Yes.
All right.
Alrighty.
I'm glad I could do that.
Yes. Thank you. Has the product succeeded as much as you thought it would? Ooh, that's a good one too.
Well, it depends when. Like, again, this wasn't really supposed to be a business. So, yeah, I mean, if you look back to 2015, 2016, I certainly didn't think we would be on Shark Tank, right? Like, that's, we hired our first employees. It was actually, Annalise was one of them, in January 2018. And that's really when we started trying as a business. So I mean, I'm happy with where we are right now. I think our entire team is really proud of like how far we've come, but our sights are set much, much bigger. We grew 300% in 2019. We hit the targets that we talk about on the show that Barbara said we couldn't hit, which that's a good thing. And we're looking to triple again in 2020. So, I mean, we have really, really big plans for this business. So, yeah, does that answer the question? I kind of forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
All right. Who or what are your target demographics? Economic level, gender, age?
No, that's a really great question. So I think what we've found, like, now that we're in 2020, like, it's not one of those things where you're like, I know my customer, and you say, we only want to serve this customer. You can actually learn who your customers are. So like, we have technology that allows us to analyze who's buying our product, and then we just listen to it. And what we've learned is our customers tend to be between the ages of 28 and 45. They tend to either be expecting kids or they've recently had kids, so they have young children. Income level hasn't been, we serve a very, very broad income range, so that's not really something that is really all that important for us. What was the other one?
Gender, age, yeah, I think.
Gender, age, we're 50-50 male, female. So again, we're looking for like what are called avatars or personas. It's typically a parent in a family that's either expecting a child or recently had a child, or it's someone who's recently heard about water quality problems from the news, like, for example, the cancer-causing chemical that y'all are talking about. Those are really our two customer avatars.
Mm-hmm. All right, this is a very, very good one.
Okay, I'm ready.
What is the hardest part of your job?
Starting a company is not easy. I'm not sure there's anything that's easy. I would say the hardest parts are also a lot of times the most fun parts because you're learning. Like, I don't come from marketing, so like learning how to do digital marketing is something that I'm learning, and that's something that's fun. It's also very hard. I mean, I would just say, like, when you compare starting a business and kind of being a founder to working for someone else at another company, it's just a lot of the things that are in place already at these other companies just don't exist as a startup until you build it. For example, just even something just as simple as like who takes the trash out, right? Like the person who cleans our offices just like gave us notice being like, yeah, I'm moving. And it's like, well, what do we do here? And, we're located in a city, so you can't just like bring it, on the metro home with you, right? It's just not something you can do. So, I mean, just like those are the really hard things that no one really tells you about. No one tells you that you're going to have to figure out like payroll and taxes and all that other stuff that just happens at, businesses that you work for. Finding space, finding buildings is really, really hard. Figuring out if you can afford it is really, really hard. They don't really teach you that in college. Like, I have degrees in chemistry and math and stuff like that. But, that's what I studied in school. I didn't study business or entrepreneurship, so this is all stuff I had to figure out on my own. But it's also the fun stuff, because it's like, well, today we got to go find some new office space. It's certainly, you don't do the same thing twice. It's hard, but it's also fun.
Cool. All right. Are you going to be in Home Depot, Lowe's, other brick and mortar stores?
So maybe. I don't suspect. Look, we're talking with Walmart. We're talking with HomeDepot.com. I'm not sure it's a great fit for us right now, just because, again, we have that personalized aspect of our product. I think what could be a really good fit for us is if we were to partner with someone who already sells stuff through Walmart. Like, for example, if there's a faucet company, for example, like we could be a really great partner for them, where they sell a faucet with a water filter attached to it, and then we could mail the cartridge to someone. That's an example of the type of relationship that I think would make sense for us to be in Home Depot, because otherwise, like, how would that look? Like, Home Depot's not going to stock different filters for every city that they service. So I think that it would be a pretty tough way forward, whereas, selling through e-commerce, it's just not a problem. E-commerce is what allows us to exist, I would say, yeah.
Are you going public in the stock market?
We do not have plans for an IPO yet. That's a really great question. Maybe someday. I mean, when you go public, that's typically when you're enormous, doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, whereas we're doing like millions of dollars of revenue. Maybe in the future we go public, or we get bought by a company that's already gone public. I would say those are two things that are not off the table, but yeah, right now we're privately held. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're going to be for a little while.
All right, that's it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
No, those are great questions. So
really good questions.
Yeah, appreciate y'all taking the time, and see if I can figure out a time to come and actually go speak at Lisbon. That'd be fun. So.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.